Up next, learn the final fates of most of the Knight Rider cars, as well as cars from the Blues Brothers, Smokey and the Bandit, Adam 12, the car, and more. We also have some never-before-seen photos of cars from the Blues Brothers meeting their demise. Plus, learn about the one piece of kit saved from the crusher. We are the Knight Rider Historians. Hey guys, Joe here. We've got a very special story for you today. We are talking to the guy who was responsible for finishing off most of the Knight Rider cars. Not this one. After Universal Studios dropped the wrecking ball on them. And we're going to learn about the one thing that he saved that he has passed over to us. We're going to open it up right now.
Knight Rider, sponsored in part by Super Soft Cling Free. It's better, does more, has super softeners, static stoppers, fresh fragrance, and deodorant. It's the do-it-all softener.
Come on. Did you really think I was going to show you all of my cards up front? You're going to have to wait until a bit later in the video for the big reveal. Hey guys, Joe here. I've got a pretty special story to tell you guys today, and I think you're really going to get a kick out of it. I think it's going to raise kind of a lot of emotions, both happy and sad. So we're going to cover the whole range here, but this is the story of a man named Julius Inglima. Now, to most of you, that name doesn't mean anything. You don't know this person, but he had a very important part in Knight Rider's history. So we're going to not only tell you about him, but you're going to hear it from his own words. We did an interview with him, and to kind of explain a little bit about what he did and what his role was. So, but let's back up a little. So back in 1986, Knight Rider was ending, unfortunately, after 4 years. And the studio had to figure out what to do with the original Knight Rider cars. They had about a dozen of them at that time, maybe a couple more, about a dozen. So a lot of you have seen some of our previous videos where we talk about the train derailment that happened in 1982, which, for those of you not familiar, in 1982, there was a train load full of brand new 1983 Firebirds and Camaros that left the GM assembly plant in Van Nuys, California, headed north. And that train derailed, and no one was injured, but the carriers that had these Firebirds and Camaros on it overturned, and due to laws in California at the time, they weren't allowed to sell those cars, so they were going to scrap them. But instead of scrapping them, GM, General Motors, made a deal with Universal Studios to give them some of the cars from this train wreck for Knight Rider. Because up until this point, Knight Rider only had 4 Trans Ams to use to film the series. And with a stunt-heavy show like Knight Rider, you can imagine that a lot of those cars were really patched together with all of the dents and dings and turbo boosts and everything. So the studio was hurting for more cars. So this unfortunate train derailment was a blessing in disguise for Universal Studios. So General Motors made a deal with Universal Studios. They said, you can have these cars, but when the show is ended, they must be destroyed. They cannot end up on the road. Not just the chassis, but the parts, everything. Cars must be destroyed. Universal Studios agreed. They were happy to get a bunch of cars. So beginning in late first season, and we especially see it in the second season and so on, there was an influx of new Firebirds and Trans Ams for the show. So the show went about its business. They filmed the rest of the series. 1986 comes. They finish filming, and it's time to fulfill the contractual obligation that the studio had with General Motors and Pontiac. and destroy the train wreck cars. Now, Universal Studios did actually own a few Knight Rider cars. They owned them outright. They were acquired outside of the train derailment. Those cars were allowed to be saved. They did not have to be destroyed because the studio owned them, and there was no agreement between General Motors and Pontiac to destroy them. So those cars were saved. They went to a car promoter company called Hollywood Productions. We're going to get into that in another video on why those cars were saved and what their life was like. But today we're talking about the train derailment cars. So 1986, they finished filming the show in, I believe, early 1986, and the cars just sat on the back lot at Universal Studios for the rest of 1986. Pieces were picked off them, you know, people were taking souvenirs, scanner bars, dash electronics, things like that. So towards the end of 1986, the studio decided that it was time to fulfill that contractual obligation and destroy the cars. So what they did is they rented a crane from a nearby crane rental company. They also rented a giant wrecking ball. They parked the Knight Rider cars under this crane with a wrecking ball on it, and they dropped the wrecking ball right on the roofs of these cars, thereby flattening them and making them unusable. Most people, if you've heard that story, you definitely have not heard the rest of the story. For many years, we had wondered, well, what happened to the cars after they had a wrecking ball on them? Were they sent to a salvage yard and they just sat there? Are they still out there with, you know, a tree growing through them and weeds? We had always wondered that. So a few weeks ago, on one of our videos that we posted, one of the comments was by Julius and Glima, who said, I crushed the Knight Rider cars and I saved a part from them. So naturally that got our attention and we reached out to him and we ended up having a phone conversation with him. So with that is the second part of the story. After the cars were crushed with a wrecking ball, they went to Van Nuys Auto Wrecking in Van Nuys, California, all of them. And from there, it was Julius's job to flatten them even more and prepare the cars to be shipped out to be shredded in a car shredder. Let that sink in for a minute. These beautiful Knight Rider cars, the left-hand blind drive car, the jump car, all the stunt cars, the super pursuit car, all destined to be shredded because they were train derailment cars. You know, it's funny. This all happened back in 1987. I was 6 years old. It was 35 years ago, but it still hurts a little, doesn't it? So, Julius's job, again, was to prepare these to be shredded. He was under orders to not take anything off the cars and to document the destruction of them for General Motors. And you'll hear that in our conversation. Julius did manage to save one thing from the cars before they were destroyed. We have that one thing here. Julius has been gracious enough to pass it on to us. So stay tuned. Later in the video, we're going to do a reveal of the one piece that Julius saved that we now have. So, with all that said, take a listen to my call with Julius and Glima. Please, I ask you, don't be harsh in the comments. Why did he crush them? You know, how could he do such a thing? Remember, this was 35 years ago. The cars at that time were disposable props. No one thought that they would be worth anything. I'm not talking financially, I'm talking historically. It was just another show that was canceled. and it was him moving on. It was the studio moving on, clearing the lot for current productions. So Julius did what he was instructed to do, and frankly, we should thank him for the piece that he did save, because it's an amazing piece. Julius also has some fantastic stories about the Blues Brothers vehicles. Not just the Monacos, but all of the Blues Brothers vehicles. Adam 12, the car from the movie The Car. And he's had a lot of history with vehicles from Universal Studios. So, with all that said, take a listen to his call. Stay tuned afterwards. We're going to do a reveal of the one piece that Julius saved, and we'll play around with it a little bit. Hi, Julius.
Yeah, that's me, Joe.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, not too bad, not bad.
Good. Well, I have to say I'm kind of excited to chat with you today. You're kind of like the missing link. For all these years, we've been trying to figure out what happened after these cars were crushed, because we had those photos that I sent you. And I know that there'd be a ton of people who would be super interested to hear not only about the Knight Rider cars, but about the Blues Brothers and the other ones as well. So I definitely appreciate that.
We were kind of rushed to get rid of the cars. GM and Universal didn't want them staying around too long. They were afraid we'd sell parts of them or sell the whole cars. I don't know why they thought we'd sell the whole cars if the roofs caved in, but that's what they thought or something. I don't know what the problem was with them. They wanted the cars crushed and out of the yard as quick as we could do it. Where those cars that were being crushed with the wrecking ball, that was the yard where we used to go and pick up their cars after they got rid of them. My owner of the company, his name was Pete Steiner. He was also a good friend of mine. He had something going with the I don't know what the title of the man was at Universal or not, but I think whoever it was at the time was in charge of getting rid of all their surplus equipment. And they even had us go out there. We spent about 2 or 3 days out there tearing out one of their office bungalow buildings. And when we tore the building down, we got all the steel from it, and then they really hauled away the mess. So that was another good deal for us. I spent a lot of time in Universal Studios back there in the early '80s.
What years did you work at Van Nuys Auto Wrecking?
I started there. It's a funny thing. A friend of mine gave me an engine and transmission for an old '38 Dodge, and I wanted a nameplate that I could put on the front of this because it was all mounted on a platform with the radiator. I wanted a nameplate for this thing, and I driving by this yard because I drove down Satakoy Street all the time, and there was this yard there. So I stopped in there and talked to the guy. He said, "Yeah, go back in there and look." He didn't have much in the way of cars at the time, but I did find a nameplate. In fact, matter of fact, I'm looking at it in my room right now. And that was the start of things. So, I didn't even know barely how to change spark plugs in those days. I'm talking about probably about 1968, 1967.
Okay.
So I walked in there, and I kept going back there, and I asked him, if he mind, I was more interested in learning how to work on cars. I asked him if I could work there part-time on Saturday and sometime Sunday. Yeah, he said sure. So I gradually learned, and then I went back to my old job, which was a nightmare. And I asked him, "Hey, can I come and work for you?" I went and worked from. That was the start of it. I worked there from 1971 to 1991.
And when did the relationship with Van Nuys Auto Wrecking and Universal Studios start? I mean, what were some of maybe the earliest film vehicles you remember getting and disposing of? Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, I can give you a rough estimate. Let's see. The Blues Brothers was basically when we started getting the movie, the cars and the stuff from the major motion pictures. We had actually got the Blues Brothers cars before the movie was released to the public. I had already crushed all the cars when I went and saw the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was probably 1979.
Yeah, that's about right. Because didn't that movie come out in like 1980?
Yeah, Blues Brothers came out in 1980, and I think I had already finished off all the cars by the time I saw the movie.
Wow. So, but
There wasn't any hurry to get rid of those cars. They could care less about them anymore once the movie was over.
Yeah. Did they pre-crush any of those cars before that you received them, or were they intact?
There was, like I think if you read the last email I sent you, the Bluesmobiles that they used in, I guess it was Laura Wacker Drive in Chicago, and they really were driving those cars over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
The engine, I suppose, blew up, and you saw a lot of smoke coming out of the back and oils being sprayed on the windshield. Well, there's actually nothing wrong with that car. They drilled a hole in the intake manifold, and exhaust manifold, rather, and mounted a tank on the inside of the car with probably transmission oil and leading down into a tube going in the manifold. Once you do something like that, it'll smoke like hell. Well, it'll really smoke.
Right.
And so there was only one car that had that in there, so it had to be that car that was on the Lower Wacker Drive. And I wanted that car. I don't know why. There wasn't much I could do with it. They had cut the exhaust off of all those cars for some reason, brother.
Huh.
They must have been loud as hell driving around. But, movies, when especially action scenes, it's all sound effects anyway. So by the time we went back to get it, they had set another car on top of it and ruined the car.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I believe it. So, yeah, I'm not familiar about. So I'm assuming there's probably not any of the original Blues Brothers cars left out there. You probably had them all and crushed them all.
Yeah. They didn't, they didn't care. Then they called the owner down there, and he went and looked at them and bid on them. I think we probably paid about probably $40-$45 a piece for the car. We got them cheap.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They basically needed to get rid of them. And that deal with Universal Studios, we got more cars from them, from TV shows. And, I never was a great TV watcher, so I didn't know what shows a lot of them came out of. We even got the cars that they had down in that lagoon over the collapsing bridge. We even got a couple of those cars they had down there in the water when they closed that display or that show down.
Okay.
And like I said, this goes back to Blues Brothers was 1980, and the Knight Rider cars were probably around 86, 87, like you said, when they canceled the show.
Yeah, we've been trying for pretty much ever since we saw those pictures of the wrecking ball to figure out when that occurred. So, are there any?
The lot where they did it in was a lot where they put all the cars that they were going to get rid of. That deal was a good deal for us, but it ended because Universal Studio probably I'm trying to think that probably around 88 or 89, they stopped building their own cars and went out to somebody to build them outside, and that was the end of that.
Okay. So is there anything more you can remember about when the Knight Rider cars arrived in terms of maybe you remember like the time of year it was, or was there something special happening in your life around that time, something that we could use to maybe narrow it down some, or is that just all a blur at this point?
I think when you said 87, I think you were probably correct. What was the year that the show was canceled?
The show ended in early 1986. They finished filming. Early 1986, like February 86, they finished filming. But we don't know when they were actually crushed.
Yeah, it was probably then toward the end of 86 or the beginning of 1987.
Okay, and
that's the best. I'm sorry I couldn't do.
No, that's okay. Because you actually did just help, because you said that your deal with Universal ended in like 1988 or 89, so we know it wasn't that you wouldn't have gotten the cars past that.
We did get cars from some other TV shows, and we actually had the Cadillac Eldorado from Smokey and the Bandit. Although all the horn stuff that was on the car, that have all been stripped off of when we got it.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know where he found that from. I don't believe that was a Universal movie. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. So were you at the yard the day that the Knight Rider cars arrived?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So did they just come on one of their car haulers?
No, they never hauled anything for us. He had for a while. He had 2 trucks, 2 roll-offs. He bought an old Dodge 600 or whatever what they call them from the city, and he converted that into a roll-off car carrier, and we used that for a few years. And then he bought a big Ford with a 4-car carrier with a car over the top of the cab.
Yeah.
And we got every car that we came from Universal Studio, and they didn't bring us anything. We had to go get it.
Okay. And I'm assuming every single one of them had the roof caved in on them, right?
Every one of them. They didn't miss a one of them. And they wanted the rest of the cars destroyed. They could have destroyed the cars more I wanted. It's real easy. They just crush the roofs down. But if I wanted to get in the cars, you saw that machine I was using. All I do is pull up, rotate the forks down, stick it underneath the hood, the roof, and pick the car up that way. And then the roof came right back up. Of course, the cars, they were still ruined, but you could get in them.
Right. Interesting. And then, so those cars, did you put them in, you called it in the email a shredder, but was it actually a car shredder, or would you put it in a car compactor?
Yeah, what we did is this is how it worked. There's big scrap yards. They're still located there, as far as I know, on Branford Street in Sun Valley, California.
Okay.
That's where we sold all our car bodies. And once I was through with them, we didn't have a car crusher at our yard. I used them later on. So all I did was take that machine and crush the roofs down flat, and I could get a couple more cars on the truck that way. And we hauled them over there and sold them, dumped them off there, and then they put them in a big lid crusher, and then they sent them down to Long Beach to Harbor where they were finally shredded. Nothing survived. Nothing survived. They didn't even want us to sell it to save any parts from them. I don't know why. I know we probably cheated a little bit on that, but they had motors there that would look brand new, but the trouble is they left them out in the rain, and that doesn't do them any good once it gets down inside the intake manifold. Yeah,
that's true.
Matter of fact, the car that had all the hydraulics on it, I don't remember everything that worked on a car. To be honest with you, I didn't watch the Night Rider show that much at the time. I didn't watch much of TV at all at the time either. It didn't have a motor in it. Under the hood, I believe, they built a platform where they put all the batteries down.
Yes.
Great thing.
Yes.
And inside the car, they had a hydraulic motor that looked. I took all the hydraulics out of it, but this is a long time ago. It looked a little bit like an overgrown convertible motor from the older convertibles.
Okay.
And there was hydraulic lines running everywhere, and there was about 7 or 8 small pistons. I took all of that out of that car. I had time to do that because I had the keys to the yard, and if I wanted to fool around, I just went in real early and stripped out whatever I wanted.
Wow.
I no longer had the hydraulics. When I brought them up here, I had a friend who just bothered me and wanted those hydraulics real bad, so I finally just let him have them.
Oh, okay. Wow. And you don't know if anyone else took anything off of those cars between the time they arrived and when they left?
Not that I know of. I was the only guy who did that. You would not be surprised how much stuff I had in my garage, stuff that wasn't saved at the yard that I wanted. I had tons of hood ornaments, tons of decal emblems. I still got a whole bunch of emblems here. But sooner or later, I had too much. I had to start getting rid of some of it. I wish I hadn't got rid of all those hood ornaments from 50s and 60s cars because they're worth a bunch of money now today.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a shame, but
yeah, they wanted the cars gone pretty quick. They didn't want us to fool around with them. I had all the time in the world for the Bluesmobiles cars. Of course, they didn't care about them. They belonged to Universal to begin with. And by the way, I never knew that those cars were damaged in a train derailment. I always thought that Universal had a bunch of brand new cars that came out of Van Nuys that maybe they weren't good enough to sell, and they gave them to the studios to use. That's how I thought the studios got them.
Oh, yeah, that's the reason there was so much concern over those cars and why you had to take pictures of them and send to General Motors is because the studio was contractually obligated to destroy those cars to make sure for liability purposes that they never got back on the street.
None of them never got back on the street.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. Yeah, we have there's 5 cars that survived, and they were all owned by the studio. They weren't ones that were under that contractual agreement. So So I own one of them, and a good friend of mine owns one of the other ones. So so thankfully, at least 5 of them survived. They weren't all destroyed.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad something survived. And there's some controversy. I've never responded to anybody on YouTube who talked about the Bluesmobiles. But you all say there was 13 of them, and one of them was saved. Well, I don't know about one of them was saved because I crushed 13 Bluesmobiles.
Okay, well then there you go. I mean, it sounds pretty clear. So
now the movie The Car, they're one of those fancy customized Lincoln. One of them was saved, and it's in Europe now. But that's all I know about that. And there were 3 more that I got from that particular movie, whoever saw it.
Okay. So do you know of any of these movie cars? I'm not talking about Knight Rider or Blues Brothers, but was there ever a time when any of these cars arrived and someone bought one of them or bought them from the yard before you destroyed them?
No. Well, no. Every car that I got from Universal, except for 2 or 3, which had nothing to do with the Blues Brothers or Knight Rider, were destroyed. Do you remember a movie by any chance? It was called The Streets of Fire.
I've heard of it. Yes, I don't think I've ever seen it.
Rock and Roll Fable with Diane Lane when she was just a kid, 19 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, they were driving around in a 49 Mercury coupe. That University had cut the top off the car and made a pseudo convertible out of that. We bought that car, and it was still in perfect condition. Had a little damage on the custom grille that they built. And I bought that car from the boss. A day later, before I picked it up, he came to me and said, he asked me if I gave him $1,000 for it. He said, I have somebody who wants that car real bad, willing to pay big money for it. Do you care? And, Pete was real good to me, so I said, go ahead, sell it to them. I almost owned that particular movie car, and it was only one of those. It's not like there was 13 or 14 cars or a whole bunch of Firebirds from Knight Rider. So some of those Firebirds we got, I remember a couple of them, were just fiberglass shells. They could just swing them around from that cable braid they had and make it look like the car was jumping from building to building. Yeah.
I'm curious.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I do remember. They had. Are you sure they were fiberglass and not rubber?
As far as I remember correctly, they were fiberglass. They were real light. They weighed next to nothing.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, they had.
But like I said, it's a long time ago.
Right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah. No, I was just curious because they would put those shells on top of the Trans Am, so whenever, because KITT was supposed to be indestructible, so whenever they would have another car hit KITT, they would have the shell on top to actually protect the Trans Am underneath. So
okay, well, so you could be more accurate than I am.
Well, I was just curious. Do you remember roughly how many shells there were?
It comes to mind, I remember 2 of them, but that could be wrong too.
Well, that's probably about right. I don't think they had a ton of them. Do you remember how many of the Trans Ams arrived? Because obviously with only the 4 car carrier, there would have to be a couple trips, I would imagine, to the studio to pick them all up.
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems like the number, about 10 of them cars, if I remember.
Okay, correctly. That's probably about right.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's probably about right. And there was never any type of paperwork exchanged or anything, or there was no titles for the cars or anything like that, right? The studio just said, "Come get them." I don't believe there
was any titles for those. We got titled and stuff from the Blues Brothers cars because I seen some of the titles, but I don't think we got anything from the GM cars.
Okay.
The Knight Rider cars.
Gotcha. So you said whenever the cars arrived there, you would use that machine to flatten them even further. Is that right? Before loading them?
I just crushed the roofs down. I just crushed the roofs down at the time. That machine that you saw had an engine puller on it, and it had enough hydraulics to where I could push bringing that claw assembly down would go down as hard as it would pull up, and I could crush the roofs down with that. That's about all I could do. I didn't have a lid crusher like I used in my later jobs. But that's all I could basically do with them. It's going down there, and that claw, if I needed to, like I did it on some of those studio cars, if I remember correctly, I could grab the sheet metal with that claw and literally rip a car to pieces with
Wow.
it. And I did that. I did that to some of the Knight Rider cars, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Because they were so intense and wanting everything destroyed.
Gotcha. So then, once you finish with those, then you would stack them on a transport and take.
We had a dump truck. We had another old Dodge dump truck. We could haul 3 or 4 cars, sometimes 3 or 4 cars at the most. When I first started working for him, we had an old flatbed truck. I don't remember what it was, and we started on a shoestring. I'd wind up cutting the cars. I'd run and rolling the cars on the side, just like I did with Knight Rider cars too. Cutting the engine transmissions out of them, sometimes the rear ends, and swapping the car back over, smashing the roof down as best I could before we got that machine. Loaded them on a big flatbed for I think 6 cars at a time, throw huge canes over them, and I was even driving them over to Sun Valley to be crushed. I can remember one time when I threw the chains over there, I didn't throw it over the hood section of the car. The hood, I guess, came up when I was driving over there, and there was a underpass from a freeway. I drove under there, and I could hear something banging. I took every light out of the top of that.
Oh, jeez.
Underpass. I just kept on going like I didn't see anything.
Well, that was probably smart.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I had an interest on. I could keep you on the phone all day telling you about. Then as I did all the wrecking, sometimes it was a difficult job and a stressful job, because we were such a busy yard at the time. But a lot of times, like when the studio cars came in, and I went and got picked up some of them with the boss, and then it was kind of a fun thing. You're just spending time at Universal Studios back there in that lot. The trans for the
yes, for the theme park. Tours. Yeah, the tours. Yeah.
We should drive by there. A couple of people took pictures of me, maybe thinking I was a movie star. I just waved at them.
Wow, that's so neat to be able to have been at the studio during those days.
It was an interesting part of my life, Joe. It really was.
Wow.
Yeah, but like I said, everything comes to an end now. I'm 82 years old,
yeah, but
I don't work anymore. I gave up working in 2013. I quit working in the record business when I was 74 years old. I was already getting pretty old for it.
Wow. Well, what a career you had, though. I mean, and what fascinating stories you have to tell. That's for sure. So you said just real quick, you took after the cars were crushed, you took them to a yard on, I think you said Branford Street in Sun Valley.
Yeah, it was on Branford Street. It's in Sun Valley. I'm trying to think.
So you said the photos that you took for Knight Rider are long gone. You definitely don't have any of those.
Yeah, they were all taken with a Polaroid camera, I believe. I never did any of that personally. Either the general manager came back or the owner came back and took the pictures, and they sent them off to Universal. Gotcha. As the final proof. Yeah, to Universal or GM. I don't know that.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Running the club for the Blues Brothers, I could tell you a whole lot more about those cars than I could about the Knight Rider stuff.
Well, that's okay.
I had more time to play with them. I did play with them. I saved a few engines out of the Blues cars, maybe about 3 or 4 that still ran really good. And they didn't all have 440s in them. Most of them did, but some of them didn't.
Okay. Do you remember any other details about any of the other, maybe the special modifications that the studio did to the other cars besides what you explained to me about the one with the smoke?
Yeah, I can tell you about the Blues Brothers cars if you're interested.
Yeah. If you don't mind, maybe just a couple minutes, because I think people would be interested to kind of hear about how those cars were built too. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Do you remember they had one seat? They had one scene in the Blues Brothers where he almost drove off the end of the bridge. The car went way off the side and just stopped there. And then he supposedly put it in gear and drove back over. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, that car was especially modified. It had no engine or transmission in it. All the heavy iron in the front had been cut off. They welded up a couple of brackets and a plate so they could bolt a pair of tires on it. And what they probably did is they probably pushed it off the edge of that bridge or whatever they did, and then they drug it back with probably the car. That car was a shell No, everything was stripped out of it to make the car as light in the front as possible.
Well, that makes sense, right? They want to have the least amount of weight going down, right?
Yeah, and then there was a there was a scene at the beginning of the movie where he jumps over the drawbridge.
Yes.
Okay, there was 2 cars that they used for that, apparently. And they were complete cars. But in the back, around the rear axle assembly, they had wrapped about 200 or 300 pounds of sheet lead on it.
Okay.
And I saved when I cut those cars, I saved all the sheet lead for myself.
Wow.
And the Bluesmobile, like I said, I don't understand why they shipped some of these cars back from Chicago. But I didn't understand how they spent money. I guess they had budget for so much of these shows.
Yeah.
And then when they spent the money, they just didn't care about the car anymore. They leave brand new batteries in them and stuff like that.
Huh.
Anyhow, let's see, what was I going to tell you? I can tell you something about the motorhomes. There was 2 of those. I didn't cut those, which I was very glad to do it, because if you cut a motorhome, you have to tear it all apart. You have to tear all the wood and all the trash out of it. And then I got a big pile of trash after the motorhomes are done. And all I got left to sell is the chassis.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and one of them, I guess they used for the one that they drove around. And then the one that went in the water, that was all done about in the back of the studio's lot. That wasn't done anywhere near Chicago. Had about 1 ton of lead ingots in the back of it. Keep the car from nose diving.
I see.
Keep the van from nose diving. I took all of those too. I took the sheet lead off the 2 Bluesmobiles, and I kept that all the lead for myself. Oh, the owner didn't care what I did with stuff like that, so I just took it home. I probably sold it off people who made bullets and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Did you take home any mementos of any of the Blues Brothers vehicles? Do you have any other pieces of any of these other film or TV cars laying around?
I didn't really save anything off the cars. I did save one of the motors for a while. I had it in my garage, but I probably put it in a car and don't remember exactly what I did with it. And there was also a Ford station wagon, a green Ford station wagon, and after when they supposedly dropped the station wagon, the Pehl station wagon, that was dropped out of a helicopter in Chicago, near the harbor, I guess. And when you saw the green Ford station wagon drive through the hole that the Pehl made in the ground, that was done in the studio. That was done in the studio back lot.
Okay.
Well, we got both those cars. I could tell by all the red paint on the bottom of the station wagon that it actually did drive that car on top of a Pinto. And that motor, too, I saved for myself and put it in the customer's car.
Huh. So possibly somewhere out there, someone's driving around with the motor that was in this car to this day. Who knows?
It's a long time ago, but there might be a couple of them going on for all I know.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you obviously you shared the picture of one of the Pintos, not the wagon, sitting on top of the Monaco police car.
Well, what they did is I don't even remember 2 station wagons. The one in Chicago, which I never got. They didn't send that one back, obviously, because it was flattened from hitting the ground. Yeah. And the other, we had one on the station wagon. That was a complete car. They just rolled it over, cut it, and threw it away. And they had some cars that they weren't wagons like that Pinto on the top of that Dodge. They weren't wagons. Some of them were cut in half, and they had all steel brackets welded on it, so they could put it on a gimbal and then turn it back and forth so it looked like it was falling through the air being driven when it actually wasn't.
Huh. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You'd be surprised at what they did with some of these cars. Yeah, the Bluesmobile that fell apart in Chicago, which they did send back to their studios, and where I got it. That was another car that did not have a motor in it and had no seats in it. And inside the car was a bracket with about six or seven levers on it. And when they wanted the car to fall apart, there was some guy who was probably laying on the floor of the car operating those levers to make all the pieces fall off.
Yeah. Huh. That's movie magic for you.
I don't know why they bothered sending that back here. Why they sent a lot of cars back. I don't know how many cars they bought for that movie, but we got 35 cars from Bluesmobiles.
Wow.
And a lot of them, they didn't do much of anything with them, like that one police car that with the same stripes on it that was used at mall scene, like that you saw hanging on the forklift.
Yeah.
There wasn't much wrong with that car that I remember correctly, but still, we could just cut it and crush it. Those 74 Dodge Broncos. I owned a couple of them that I bought from the state and the police department. And, they were nice, strong, solid bodies. That's why they would probably use that, or they particularly picked that particular car. And that car looked like it was hardly used. Every time you saw a car wreck, they probably had 2 or 3 backups.
Oh, yes.
So they could keep the scene going,
Right, definitely. Okay, well, I mean, I think, the information you've shared today, Julius, has been absolutely fascinating, and you've kind of, like I said, you've filled in a blank that we've had for a long, long time about what happened to these cars after those wrecking balls came down on them. So now we know for sure their true fate. So I certainly appreciate your time. All right, Julius, I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much, and we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Okay, thank you, Joe, and thank you for your attention to me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Anytime. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, Joe.
All right,
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys. The moment of truth is here. This is the package that Julius sent us. I know what's inside. This is the one and only piece that he saved before the original Knight Rider cars were destroyed way back in 1987. He has graciously given it to us to add to our collection, and I'm just really excited to open it up. So without further ado, let's see what's in here. You guys are going to love this. Any ideas? I'm sure most of you guys know what this is, just by the shape. Let's see, it's the first time we're seeing this. Ready? Oh man, look at that. An original scanner bar. And check this out. It has the car number on it. So for you guys not familiar, Universal Studios numbered all of their vehicle assets, not just Knight Rider, all their vehicles. Magnum PI, A-Team, all the background vehicles, everything had a number. And we know all of the Knight Rider car numbers, and we know what those numbers, what cars those numbers equated to and what those cars did. So we can see here, this is 1084. 1084, and you've heard me talk about this a number of times on previous videos. 1084 was actually the roll-caged, acrylic windowed jump car. They used it all 4 seasons. The car itself changed, but it always had this same number, and it was always roll-caged, and it was always used for jumps. This scanner bar probably did more turbo boost than any other scanner bar. That is amazing. It's got all of its original bulbs. We're gonna have to test these and see which ones still work, if any. And look, there's silicone around them, and looks like they had silicone here to seal where the lens meets the bar. And we've of course got the mounting tabs here. This side's pretty rusty, and actually it looks like water got in over here and kind of rusted this side out, but that's okay. Look at that. Look at that. We have one other original scanner bar in our Hoffnose, and it has an original controller with it too. We actually own a second original controller from another Knight Rider car, but we didn't have an original scanner bar to go with it, but now we do. So this is not going to go in a car, by the way. We'd consider it, but especially with the numbers on it and just the condition it's in, we're going to mount this in a display with the original controller. So, we could take it to shows and have it sitting there and people can see it working again. So this is just absolutely amazing. Original scanner lens still attached. It's got some scratches, but otherwise nice. And look at this, I just noticed. This lip along the bottom here, has tons of coats of paint on it, which is consistent with what we know about the cars, right? Because they put these in, and whenever they would repaint the cars, they would just mask off what they had to mask off and just keep painting over and over on these cars. So we would expect to see a ton of paint, which we do right here. Unbelievable. What do you say we get this connected to a battery and see which one of these lights, if any, still light up?
And now, while we listen to Joe's selection of Knight Rider music that we received directly from Don Peake himself, we'd like to thank these Patreon supporters. Look at you guys scrolling up the screen to my right. Wait a minute, how can you tell which side is my right since you can't see me because I'm not on camera? Oh well, you know what I mean. We're featuring these fine supporters at our Knight Rider Prop Restorer level. Thank you very much for your support. And for those of you at the Knight Rider History Hunter level, we're recognizing you right now in the description. Now, if you enjoyed seeing this golden nugget of Knight Rider history being rescued from obscurity, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support would empower us to bring you even more of these historical nuggets. We are the Knight Rider Historians. Till next time, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.